All right, so when I say the name Hela, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's that terrifying, impossibly cool goddess of death from the movies, right? A character really defined by two unforgettable titles. First, there's this bombshell, Odin's firstborn, a secret so big it literally rewrote Asgardian history and stuck her right at the heart of the royal family, a truth they buried for thousands of years. And then, of course, you've got her main title, the Goddess of Death. I mean, that says it all, doesn't it? It just screams immense power, total control, and her role as the absolute final word in the universe.
But what if I told you that this all-conquering, world-breaking daughter of Odin is just one piece of a much older, much stranger puzzle? Is this powerhouse version her real origin story? Well, to figure that out, we need to take a trip way, way back in time.
Let's kick things off with her very first incarnation, the mythological Hel, the OG ruler of the dead from the Old Norse sagas. So first things first, let's talk about her family. Forget Odin entirely. The original Hel was actually the daughter of Loki, the trickster god himself, and a giantess named Angerboda. And get this, her siblings were the infamous giant wolf Fenrir and the world serpent Jörmungandr. There was even a prophecy that these three kids would be the downfall of the gods, which you can imagine had Odin sweating. And what does a freaked out Odin do? He banishes them, of course. Hel got tossed down into Niflheim, the super dark, frozen underworld. But here's the crazy part. He didn't just banish her, he also made her the queen of the place. He gave her total control over the souls of anyone who died of sickness or old age. You know, the ones who didn't die a glorious death in battle. And her appearance, it was a perfect and pretty gruesome symbol of her job. She was literally split down the middle. One half of her body looked like a vibrant, healthy woman, but the other half, that was the decaying blue-black flesh of a corpse. She was the living embodiment of that line between life and death.
Now, here's maybe the biggest difference of all. Unlike the ambitious conqueror we know from the movies, the mythological Hel was, well, she was pretty chill. She was a passive administrator, somber, and almost never left her kingdom. Her biggest claim to fame wasn't some epic invasion, it was actually a refusal, when she flat out said no to releasing the beloved god Balder after he died.
So the question is, how do we get from a quiet, half-dead bookkeeper to the character we know today? Well, this timeline kind of maps it out. For centuries, she was just a figure in old stories. Then, boom, 1964, she jumps into the pages of Marvel Comics. And then, in 2017, she's completely reinvented for a massive global audience. And that brings us to her second face, the comic book Hela. And this is where her family tree starts to get, let's just say, a little complicated. So when Marvel first brought Hela to life in the comics, they played it pretty straight. She was Loki's daughter, and Odin put her in charge of Hel and Niflheim. But her personality was totally different. This Hela was scheming, ambitious, and hungry for power, always butting heads with Thor. But then, comics did what comics do best. They introduced a retcon, which is just a fancy way of saying they'd changed the story. And in 2020, Hela got a wild one, a time paradox. Okay, try to keep up, because this is a mindbender. This new story says Hela was actually created by Bor, who's Odin's father. Bor then took the baby Hela and gave her to a version of Loki from the past, and that Loki raised her as his daughter. So, is Loki her dad? Kinda, but not by blood, and only because of some seriously wacky time travel stuff. It's a pretty cool twist, you have to admit. And now for her third and definitely most famous face. The cinematic conqueror, who just exploded onto our screens and flipped the script on everything we thought we knew. Yeah, this was a total reboot. No more Loki, no more time paradoxes. In the Marvel movies, Hela is, plain and simple, Odin's firstborn child, the original heir to the throne, Thor's older sister, and the one with the actual birthright to rule Asgard. This new origin also gave us this incredible, dark, secret history for Asgard. Hela wasn't just a princess, she was Odin's personal executioner, the general who led his brutal conquest of the Nine Realms. But her lust for power just grew and grew, becoming way too much for him. When Odin decided to become a peaceful king, Hela wanted more war. He couldn't bring himself to kill her, so he locked her away using his own life force, and then just erased her from every history book, every painting, every memory in Asgard. So, there you have it. 3 totally different origins. A passive administrator, a time travel paradox daughter, and a bloodthirsty conqueror. So what's the thread that ties them all together? What is it that makes Hela, well, Hela? It's her power. No matter the version, her abilities are always tied to death and her domain. She's got the touch of death, she can raise entire armies of dead soldiers, and she can pull those terrifying necroswords out of thin air. And here's the kicker. Her strength is always connected to her realm, whether that's the mythical Niflheim or the cinematic Asgard. And you can't forget that iconic headdress and cloak. That's a constant. I mean, when you lay it all out side by side like this, the evolution is just crystal clear. Look at how her parentage completely shifts from Loki's kid to Odin's. And just check out the massive change in her role and personality. She goes from this quiet, stationary figure to a scheming ruler, and then finally to that ruthless, ambitious conqueror that we all know so well. Her whole journey is this incredible transformation, really from a somber half-corpse administrator to a world-ending conqueror. She went from being a quiet symbol of death's inevitability to an active, destructive force of nature. But in the end, it doesn't really matter who her father is or what her personality is like. Her purpose in the story is always the same. Whether she's Loki's outcast daughter or Odin's dirty little secret, Hela is the shadow that gives Asgard its light. She represents its dark past, its hidden shame, and the constant threat that forges its heroes. So that kind of leaves us with one last big question. Why the change? Why did this passive keeper of souls morph into an active agent of total destruction? From a quiet administrator to a terrifying conqueror, what does Hela's evolution tell us about how we as a culture have changed the way we imagine death itself?